Garden Express are Australia's leading mail ordering service, offering a wide range of quality gardening products. Each week on the Garden Gurus Live, the team at Garden Express will share a weekly offer. So make sure after today's show, you jump online and visit their website.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Garden Gurus Live. I'm Darren and I'm very happy to be here, and it's great to see you all again. We're a little bit late starting today, a couple of technical issues, but it should be, fingers crossed, all smooth sailing from now. Trevor is off for a week, so that's why I'm here, and I'm looking forward to answering all your questions, seeing all your garden pictures, and just hearing about how your garden's going. As per usual, we have a $50 voucher to give away from Garden Express. So make sure you get your questions in as soon as possible, and we'll choose our favourite question and award that great prize to. So thanks to all who've already sent questions in. It's always great to have a few questions to start with. And remember, please include your location and any more information that you think can help me answer your questions. Before we start with the questions though, we'll have a quick look at the weather around Australia. In Perth today, I can tell you it's a beautiful 20 degrees, fine and sunny, though we do have a lot of rain coming tomorrow. Looks like fairly similar weather. Most of Australia, Hobart's looking cold. Canberra, a maximum of only 11 degrees. No, thank you. And Darwin, do you have winter in Darwin? 32 degrees. That is just fantastic. Before we kick off the program, a quick nod to our sponsor, Garden Express. Incredible website. You can do all your garden shopping directly from their website, from the comfort of your lounge room. Absolutely perfect on a cold, wet winter's day. This week, they have a special on bare-rooted roses, including a multi-buy option where if you purchase 3 or more, you'll get a fantastic price. Holly will pop the link up to these and you'll be able to have a look at all the varieties they have, get yourself that multi-buy option and save yourself a few dollars. Bare-rooted roses are a great way to buy roses because you're just paying just for the rose. You're not paying for a plastic pot. You're not even paying for potting mix. They get delivered to your house, just the rose, just the root system. They're very easy to plant, very easy to handle, it's lightweight, a lot lighter than when you buy them in pots. It's just a matter of preparing the soil really well. Like roses do like a nice, rich, healthy soil, bit of compost in sandy soils, a little bit of clay, some well-aged animal manure, get them in there, water them in well with a bit of sea salt, settle them in, and come spring, as soon as the weather warms up, they'll boom away and perform brilliantly. So it's a great way to buy roses. Another thing to check out on the Garden Express website is their range of edibles. And right now, it's a fantastic time to be buying and planting asparagus and rhubarb. They're dormant in winter, so again, you can buy them as bare-rooted plants, just as crown. So you'll get this small plant. It just looks like a root system with a little crown on top. Put it into improved soil, really improve that soil, get it nice and rich and healthy. And those asparagus and rhubarb crowns will establish really quickly. Boom away. You'll see some beautiful fresh growth on the rhubarb straight away. You'll get the big fronds on the asparagus. Make sure you don't harvest any spears for a year or two on the asparagus. Let them put all their energy into growing and building up that crown. Feed them through spring and summer, and then within a couple of seasons, you'll be getting beautiful, fresh asparagus spears. The only problem I have with asparagus in the garden is most of the spears don't make it into the kitchen. They're so delicious, just fresh cut off the plant, eat them out in the garden while you're working. So let's get into some questions and answers straight away. Louise Williams is wondering if it's okay to use weed and feed on their ornamental no-mow grasses. She thinks she's got nutgrass starting to take over, and she says she loves the show, which is great to hear. Thank you, Louise. So the no-mow grass, it will depend very much on what variety of grass you have. So the weed and feeds are generally specific to certain varieties of grass. So some, for example, will be really good for couch grasses, not so good for buffalo grasses. So you really need to investigate what variety of no-mow grass you have, and then have a look at the weed and feeds and see if they're suitable for that. Now, the bad news is none of the weed and feeds that I'm aware of anyhow are any good to control nutgrass. Nutgrass is a very difficult weed to control. There's specific sprays dedicated to try and eradicate this absolute garden nasty. So you may need to look at that, finding a spray specifically for nutgrass. There's a spray called sedge hammer, because nutgrass is a type of sedge, and that will control the nutgrass. You will need to do more than one spray to get on top of it. Issue with nutgrass is it sends a lot of subsurface runners from the root system. They'll run quite a way, pop up with more nutgrass. So if you don't get them all, they'll just keep on popping up. So it's a matter of being very, very consistent and getting on top of it as soon as you see it. I don't envy you having nutgrass in the garden. It's very difficult to control. Now, Susan Spencer has sent us in some photos, and she's worried about a caterpillar that's devouring her peace lilies. That caterpillar looks like to me to be a hawk moth caterpillar, very common type of moth and caterpillar all around Australia. Now, hawk moths are good pollinators in the garden, particularly good pollinators if you're trying to grow pawpaws or papayas. So you don't want to be going to completely eradicating these caterpillars out of your garden. If they're really causing a problem with the peace lilies, pick them off, find somewhere else to put them in the garden. If you've got chooks, maybe throw a few into the chooks. If you do need to spray to try and get them under control, something like dipel will get the numbers down. But moths are important pollinators, and are good to see in the garden, and they're quite beautiful insects. And the hawk moth is a particularly showy type of moth. Now, I forgot to mention earlier, so with the Garden Express, for a limited time only, get an extra 20% off your purchase as long as you mention this the discount code at checkout. And the discount code is GE-EOFYS20. So you put that in at checkout, claim your discount, and save an extra 20% off, which is a great saving. But this is only till the 30th of June, till the end of the financial year. So jump on the Garden Express website, have a look at all the great flowering and edible plants they have, and save yourself an extra 20%. Straight back to the questions. Now, Alison Mellon is hoping I can give us some help. She has a navel orange tree. It's about 10 years old, produces an amazing amount of fruit, but unfortunately, none of them are edible. They're really, really sour, and wants to know how to get the fruit to be a better quality eating fruit. And she's on the verge of ripping it out and throwing it away, which is not what you want to hear about a 10-year-old orange tree. So first question, Alison, would to be make sure what you're actually picking fruit of is an orange tree. Oranges are, like most citrus, budded trees, so they have a graft and a rootstock. Occasionally, I do come across people who are having an issue saying they've got really sour oranges or mandarins as well. And what's happened is many years ago, the original budded stock, so the variety that you're growing that you actually want to get, has died off, and the rootstock's taken over, and the rootstock fruit is very sour. So that is the first thing I check. Rootstock looks very different to your desirable stock on the fruit trees, on the citrus. Pretty spiky grow, very vigorous, and the fruit will be pale yellow rather than orange. Once you've had a look at that, if it's definitely an orange tree, it's a couple of things you need to keep in mind. Is one, nutrients. To get the best quality fruit, you have to supply the best quality fertilizer. So I would be using Troforte fertilizer on those orange trees with some rock minerals and the occasional application of a liquid potash. So that will help supply all the minerals to the tree to produce the best quality fruit. And the second thing too is once you pick oranges, they don't sweeten. So you need to leave them on the tree as long as possible, to the point where they start to fall off. And that gives the fruit the longest period of time to really develop all those sugars that makes the oranges really, really sweet. So leave them on as long as possible, get some minerals and good quality fertilizer into the tree, and see how you go. Hopefully that you can turn that around, and so you don't have to rip that 10-year-old orange tree out. Now, Leah Robinson in Brisbane has some white material all over a rose plant. It looks terrible, and the roses are dying back. What's on there, Leah, is a type of scale insect. So you've got a couple of things you can do there. You can simply spray it with white oil, which will eventually suffocate the scale and kill it off. And when you do your winter prune on the roses too, so I don't know, when you go in Brisbane, probably a bit later in winter than what we do in Perth, but you give that rose a really nice hard prune, and then spray the whole plant with lime sulfur at the stronger spray dilution. Read the label, tell you a winter and a summer spray dilution. And the other thing, that scale does clean off the plant pretty easily. So if you've got a hose with decent bit of water pressure, go through and hose it off. You'll get 90% of it off with the hose. You tend to see scale on roses that have other issues going as well. They're either hungry or they're drying out during the warmer months. So make sure you're getting moisture deep into the soil profile around the rose. So you may need to use a wetting agent, add some compost to the soil around it, and make sure it's well fed. Again, Tro Forte during the growing season will keep that plant really well fed, plenty of nutrition in the soil for it, and then they tend to be far more resilient and resistant to these type of pests. Ernie Muff wants to know how to cut back their fruit trees and what to feed them. Well, it depends a little bit, Ernie, on what type of fruit trees you have. So citrus, you don't prune very hard. You'll prune them after fruiting, just lightly, just to keep them in a good shape, keep the size under control so they're easy to harvest, easy to net if you need to net for birds or insects. Your stone fruit, you'll prune again after harvest for most of those. Some of them you'll prune in winter as well. The main exception to pruning the stone fruit in winter is apricots. We try to avoid pruning apricots anytime after summer, after they've had their crops, because they are a little bit susceptible, or actually very susceptible, to a couple of fungal diseases which can be exacerbated by winter pruning. So you don't need to generally prune excessively hard. You're trying to prune for shape, size, and to make them easy to harvest and to make them easy to net. So just keep those things in mind and you should be absolutely fine. Now, Jill Coolman in Mandra, not Mundaring, has sent some photos of what looks like to me a lily pilly, and she has some wax scale all over it. So that's that white bug, Jill, that's got all through your lily pillies. Lily pillies are one plant that's particularly susceptible to waxy scale. It provides a perfect habitat for that scale insect. Very dense foliage, nice and protected from predators. You know, it's hard for birds to get in there and feast on the scale when it's so much foliage around. The best way to treat the wax scale is with oil-based spray. So you can use neem oil, you can use white oil, pest oil. All those products will work particularly well. It will take 2 or 3 applications to really be effective, and you should be spraying early spring when the little crawler, so that's the juvenile forms of the scale, is particularly active. So it's moving around the plant and forming other colonies. You can go through and rub all that scale off if it's not too much on there. Physically remove it, clean it up, and then give the plant a spray of white oil and try and get it under control like that, even when that waxy scale is dead. So if you spray it with white oil, it's killed off. It does still hang on that tree for quite some time after it's been sprayed and it's been effectively knocked off. So removing it physically, if it's not too much, white oil spray. If you have a persistent problem, you really can't get rid of it all. There's lots of the pests through your plants. You may need to use an insecticide as well, but 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, the oil-based sprays will clean that up for you. So thank you to everyone who sent photos. It's so much easier to diagnose problems and issues and identify plants from photos than just from descriptions. So keep those photos coming. Really appreciate it. Now, Diane Vanderkoolch sent some photos in. She's got a plant that she's put a circle around the photo for me to try and identify amongst another group of other plants. She's wondering whether it sold it as a bird's nest fern and is concerned that it's not an actual bird's nest fern. Well, unfortunately, Diane, that photo has come through really blurry for us. We've tried blowing it up and I really can't get a good handle on what it is, but I can say with a fair degree of confidence that it's not a bird's nest fern. It might be a type of spathiphyllum, one of the giant forms of spathiphyllum, but if you can get us a clearer photo just of that plant, that would really help. I can't make a definitive from that photo. The rest of your garden, though, looking in potted gardens, looking pretty good. She's also asked how often should bird's nest ferns be watered in Perth in winter. She's going away and has her son looking after the bird's nest ferns. I can understand why you'd be concerned about leaving your plants in the care of your sons. I would be very concerned if my sons were looking after my plants. The good news, in winter, your bird's nest fern probably doesn't require any supplementary water to the rainfall we get. If it's undercover and there's no rainfall on there, probably a water once a week just to moisten the the potting mix is all that'll need. I think you're going to be pretty safe going away. You'll be able to relax and know that bird's nest fern, which is a magnificent specimen, by the way, will still be looking pretty good by the time you get home. As long as you're not coming back in late summer, if you're only going away for a couple of weeks, I think you can rest assured that'll be fine. You don't want the plant to dry out completely, but as long as it's got a little bit of moisture in that root system, it will be absolutely fine. Now, Robin Mitchell wants to know if there's any chance we could do a segment on safe plants to have indoors and outdoors when you own pets. Now, this is something we get asked about a lot. I know my landscaping business, I'm constantly asked by clients about the safety of plants, and it's something we take very seriously because obviously pets are a very important part of our family. So Robin says she thinks peace lilies are one of the plants that's not safe for animals, but not sure about anything else. So Robin, there are lots of plants that are poisonous to animals, lots of plants that are poisonous to people. Many of them we grow in our gardens quite safely and don't cause us any problem because generally speaking, for these plants to actually have any ill effect on people or pets, they need to be eaten and consumed, and sometimes consumed in quite large amounts. And the plants have built-in mechanisms to stop people and animals from eating them. So they might be very bitter or very astringent. So although there are a lot of plants that have potential to be dangerous, generally speaking, not many of them will be. So a great resource for finding out what plants to avoid having in your garden and as your indoor plants, if you do have pets around and you're looking to protect them, is your local vets. Nearly all the local vets will have a list of plants that they will strongly recommend that you don't have in your garden or as indoor plants if you've got, particularly cats and dogs. But it's something you'd need to judge with your individual pets, because I know, being a dog owner, some dogs will chew plants like crazy. Other dogs won't touch them at all. So you got to do your own risk matrix on that a little bit, and just do a little bit of research, and you'll be able to find out which plants are definite no-nos and which might be slightly risky. But you can separate those plants in your garden so your cats and dogs can't get to them. Liberty War has sent me some photos in of her agapanthus growing under the little bit in the shelter of a trampoline by the look of it. It's got a section that's never really taken off, even though it's had agapanthus planted at the same time as other agapanthus that are doing really well, and has actually planted some more in there since, trying to get them growing. But the new plants haven't taken off as well. And she does have that area well fenced off to prevent the dogs running through there. So we can't blame the dogs for this one. It's hard to say, Liberty, without having a look exactly what the issue would be, but my suspicion would be quite strongly that it's something to do with the soil or something to do with irrigation or watering over summer. So have a look at the soil, see if it's open and free draining. Agapanthus are very resilient and will grow in most soil types, but they do like a healthy, well-drained, free-draining soil that their root system can penetrate into pretty easily, and they have good access to nutrients and water. So have a look at your irrigation system as well. If you've got automatic irrigation that's watering that section of the garden, of the lawn and the agapanthus, just make sure it's actually reaching those areas and that the sprinklers aren't being shadowed or blocked from getting to that part of the garden by other plants in the garden as well. That's a common thing that we see in gardens around Perth, for example, but it's either soil or water. So good thing about agapanthus, you can dig them up at this time of the year quite easily and quite readily, and then do some soil improvement. So dig them up, clean the plants up, trim up any damaged roots, clean off any old foliage, then go through, dig the soil over with some compost, really build that compost content up into the soil, maybe a little bit of well-aged animal manure, and then replant into that fresh soil, add some fertilizer at the same time, and hopefully those agapanthus will then jump away this coming spring. Now, Lynn has asked about fertilizer for potted plants, in particularly pothos, the devil's ivy. Well, a lot of our indoor plants, Lynn, they require very small amounts of fertilizer regularly. When they're growing indoors, they don't need to tend to grow anywhere near as vigorously as outdoor plants. So they're not looking to take up a lot of nutrients quickly. So controlled release fertilizers are ideal. and look for one that's been specifically formulated for indoor plants. So they'll release their fertilizer and nutrients into the soil in response to weather conditions and the amount of moisture in the soil, the amount of sun and heat. There's plenty on the market. Osmocote make a really good indoor slow release fertilizer, and that'd probably be my first choice with those. In spring, some of your plants, once we've got through winter and they're sat indoors all through the winter months, looking for a bit of TLC and a bit of happy times to get them growing again, take them outdoors, find a nice shady area, and then you can liquid feed them as well. Kick some growth into them that way in the warmer months. Otherwise, controlled release fertilizer, and you're probably only putting that on once or twice a year. Before we go any further, we would love you all to do us a big favour by tagging your friends into the comments below and sharing that live right now so we can build up our audience and keep all those questions coming. There have been some great questions so far this morning. Janine Napier in Perth wants to know where's the best place to plant hippies. I'm presuming that's the hippie-astrums, not the hippies that live around Fremantle, but it's up to you, Janine. I have them in pots and in the ground, and none of them seem very happy. Well, hippie-astrums like an open, sunny area, nice, rich soil. They do very well in pots, and they actually flower extremely well, even pot-bound in pots. So it's probably trying to get them where they're getting plenty of sun. You might want to, in Perth, protect them a little bit from that extreme afternoon sun, but where they're getting plenty of sun, keep them well fed. So slow release fertilizer, a bit of liquid feed during the spring and early summer months. They tend to not flower very well when they're first planted out or when they're first split up. They take a few years to mature and start flowering. But once they're established, they flower extremely well. And just make sure maybe if there's not too much root competition around. So they don't really like being right at the base of a big, vigorous tree, for example. So somewhere where they've got access to plenty of improved soil, plenty of sun, and keep them well watered through the hottest part of summer, and they should do really well for you. They're a great, reliable, old-fashioned plant that does fantastically in our gardens. Nicole has sent us some photos through. It's about 10 years ago, she bought a plant that was from a nursery, sold it as a Gymea lily or a Dorianthus, a native Australian lily. After 10 years, it's finally got a spear out of it, and she's wondering if it actually is a Dorianthus or whether she's been sold something else, and why it's taken so long to flower. Well, Nicole, Dorianthus do take a long time to flower. 10's probably at the top end of the scale. I've seen them flower in as short as 3 to 5 years, but 10 years is not unheard of. There's a couple of different Dorianthus around. Couple of different species. The one that we grow the most is Doriantha excelsa, and that's the one that has a straight spike out, which is the one you've got in your garden. That will open up from the top down, have those beautiful rich pink flowers, which the birds absolutely adore in winter because they're very heavy with nectar. So you're doing a great thing for your native birds by having that in your garden and growing it through to flower. That plant, the rosette that flower's coming out, the flower spike's coming out of, once that flower finishes, it will die down. That rosette will die off, and you'll get pups coming away from the base. So it's very much like a century plant, which a lot of people are familiar with. The agave does the same thing. The spear comes up, flowers, that rosette dies off, and then you get fresh pups coming away from the base. Beautiful ornamental plant. Even when they're not in flower, they've got great architectural structure. And it's always good to have a native Australian lily growing in your garden and doing particularly well. Maria Delamere, sorry about that, Maria, planted a fine leaf lawn, and it did really well when she first planted it back in April, but now it's not looking too great. It's looking not very good at all, Maria, unfortunately. A lot of brown patches, and she's been fertilising it, but it's not coming good. This time of the year, that lawn, and I'm suspecting it's a type of cooch, probably a wintergreen, they are not going to grow. They're not going to green up from that condition through the winter months. There's not a lot you can do about it. It certainly doesn't need fertilising in winter. That granular fertilisers don't get taken up very readily. You could look at getting a liquid spray-on product for lawn repair. So most of the garden centres and the hardware stores will sell a liquid lawn repair spray. You could try that on the other thing I'd be a little bit concerned about with that lawn too, going by those pictures, is you may have some fungal issues in there. It's got too wet. There's too much leaf mass on there. and you're getting some fungal, some rotting of foliage in amongst all the blades of grass. So have a bit of a scratch around it in amongst those blades and see if it does look like there's rot and decay amongst the foliage. If there is, you may need to get yourself a lawn fungicide and put a couple of applications of lawn fungicide in. Finally, the last thing I'd be looking for is just seeing how well that area is draining. If the water's sitting there and not draining away and on cold, wet weather, the lawn does rot, and that could cause a lot of problems. So what you would need to do if it's not free draining is deep aerate it with a garden fork. So get a garden fork, really push it in deeply into the soil, wriggle it around to free up, loosen up the soil, and hopefully increase that drainage so it is free draining very quickly and not sitting there wet after the rain and causing that lawn to rot. Hopefully that will then kick back for you in spring. And given how dense that grass is looking, how sort of spongy it's looking, you may need to do a hard mow, a bit of a renovation on that grass in spring. As soon as the weather warms up, though, the good thing about couch grasses, they kick back very, very quickly and respond really well to hot weather. So we're going to move on to the plant of the week. I'll just grab my little posy of flowers I brought in. I'm sure most people will recognise these. It's Camellia japonicas, and this particular variety is well named. It's called Something Beautiful. Now, I love camellias. They're probably my favourite flowering plant. They grow all around Australia, possibly not up in the Northern Territory, but just about every other state in Australia. Camellias do very, very well. And love to hear from anyone in the Northern Territory that's growing camellia as well. Are a plant that's very particular about their soil. They need a low pH, so slightly acidic soil. Needs to be free draining. They are very susceptible to root rot if the soil's too heavy and it doesn't drain freely. So if you've got clay soils, you'll need to add a lot of compost into the soil and potentially mound plant them so the water is draining away from that root ball very quickly. If you're in very sandy soils, you can add a compost, some clay, and again, you just want to make sure that although the soil's staying moist, it is free draining. They like to be more mulched, as they have a very shallow root system and quite susceptible to hot sun drying out the root system and causing scorch. Fertilise them in spring, summer and autumn. Keep the foliage looking really well. A lot of camellias do have absolutely beautiful dark green foliage, and florists use the foliage on its own when they're not flowering, just as for decoration in bouquets of flowers. I put camellia foliage in because it's so dark green and such a good looking type of foliage. If you're in an area that has alkaline soil, sometimes it's just too much to try and deal with that soil to get it to a condition that camellias will grow in. So in that situation, I would definitely recommend growing camellias in pots. That way you can get a really good quality azalea camellia potting mix that's nice and acidic, and the camellias will thrive. And so that means if you're in a near coastal area that has alkaline soils, grow them in pots, keep them out of the sea breeze, and they'll do very well as well. Huge range of colours, so from whites, pinks, right through to reds, even some with tones of purple through them, and bicolours. Like this one has pink and white. You'll get ones with multiple colours on the one flower. Many different flower forms, from singles, doubles, semi-doubles, full doubles, peony shapes, whole range of different flower forms, and a whole range of growth habits. There's literally tens of thousands of different name varieties of Camellia japonica alone. That's without all the other species of camellias. So there's bound to be one that you really like. So if you get an opportunity, get out to the garden centres. If you know of a specialist camellia nursery, go out and have a look at those and see them while they're in flower, and pick yourself out 1, 3 or more varieties to grow in your own garden. You will not regret it. They're a fantastic plant. So back to the question. So Christine Rankin in Stirling has a lot of leaves have dropped off their native frangipani. Hasn't done this before and is concerned they might be losing the tree, and was looking to give it a hard prune in coming weeks to get about a third of the size off. Probably not an ideal thing. If the tree is stressed and it's dropping a lot of leaves, I certainly wouldn't be pruning it. And the native frangipanis are also a little bit cold intolerant, so not an ideal time to do much with the native frangipanis. They do tend to drop a lot of leaves at different times of the year. Sometimes they'll do it when they're actively growing in summer. Sometimes they'll do it in winter. Now, Christine's in Perth. We've had a very odd season this year. We've had a long, hot, dry air period, and then we had a huge amount of rain early in June. So I would say it's just a response, Christine, to that weather climatic conditions. Hold off till spring, probably second, third week of September. Give the plant your prune that you want to do, then take the third off the top. fertilize it, apply some compost, mulch it, and I would expect that native frangipani to start throwing beautiful fresh growth and looking really healthy very, very quickly. So talking of winter, so we're in winter at the moment, other than the Northern Territory, of course, and we're experiencing some very chilly mornings here in Perth. I think it's about 3 degrees in Perth this morning, which for us is very, very cold. So I just thought I'd share with you a couple of my garden tips to dealing with winter. And the first one is, which I've already spoken about it with a couple of questions, is drainage around plants. So you need to be very aware that when we get a lot of rain, there's not a lot of sunshine around, it's very cold in the garden, that water sitting around plants in garden beds can be deadly and fatal to some plants, and just really knock other plants around. So if you have a decent rain event in your garden and weather finds up the next day, have a look around, see if there's any areas where the rain is sitting in your garden, sitting on your lawns too in particular, because you may need to work on some drainage there. And it can quite often be something as simple as the garden fork into the soil to open it up and just to improve the drainage that way. Some parts of the garden may need to look at putting in some subsurface drainage to just get some of that excess water away from the root systems of your plants, to make sure they don't just get issues such as root rot, and then you start losing some of your valuable garden plants. Another big issue at this time of the year in the winter gardens is, of course, frost. So if you're in a frost-prone area, you will need to look at trying to protect some of your more frost-sensitive plants, particularly while they're young, from frost. And that could be as simple as putting a guard around the plant. So something like a plastic sheeting around on 3 or 4 stakes around the plant, just to stop that frost from settling on the plant. And also, if you do have frost areas and you're worried about frost on plants, getting out early morning when those frosts are settling and putting the hose over the plants to wash the frost off really quickly so it doesn't get a chance to settle on the plants will make a big difference. And you can also buy frost shielding products from your local garden centre, your local hardware store, that you can apply to the plants. That does give a little bit of frost protection as well. Lawns can be quite troublesome during the colder months, and again, it normally comes down to drainage. The soil gets really, really wet. So if you can avoid heavy foot traffic on lawns through the winter months, maybe areas that are susceptible to wear and tear, fence them off from pets. Particularly, if you've got large dogs that like to run across certain areas of the lawn, protect those areas just over the winter months so the lawns don't get so badly damaged by compaction and wear and tear, and they'll bounce back very quickly in spring. But winter's an important part of the garden cycle. We need the rain, we need the cooler weather to give plants a bit of a break from our hot Australian summers, and but make the most of it. But there are a couple of things you do need to keep an eye out for. Now, keep your questions coming. If you want a chance to win that $50 Garden Express voucher, and it's good value, $50 at the moment, because you can get on there with that voucher and get a discount and get yourself even more value for money out of that, and get some of those bare-rooted roses, rhubarb plants, asparagus plants, really improve your garden. Now, Rusty has asked, has a young poinciana tree that's looking a bit sad, hasn't been in the ground very long, suspects it's the change of weather, and is there anything you should do? Should he fertilise it? Well, Rusty, I definitely wouldn't be applying fertiliser to poincianas during winter. They're not actively growing in the cooler parts of Australia. Anywhere sort of south of Darwin, just about there, they start to go into a bit of a winter sulk. So definitely don't fertilise it. Try and protect it a little bit from the cold weather as much as you can. Spoke just about putting a bit of a plastic shield around the plant. That can certainly help. It'll provide a bit of a microclimate, so when the sun is out during the day, it'll be a little bit warmer around that poinciana. You're trying to baby it through winter as much as you can, and make sure it's draining well. You won't see any growth in the cooler parts of Australia. You won't see any growth on a poinciana tree until sometimes as late as the end of November. So if it doesn't really start shooting away till early October, early November, don't panic. It will get there. Once it starts growing, then you can apply fertiliser. Put some Tro Forte on it, hit it with some power feed. It will respond to hot weather brilliantly. Now, Aaron Chipperelli, in Midvale in Perth, is pruning their roses soon. Wants to know if there's anything they should do to control chili thrip this time of the year. Well, Aaron, it's good to be thinking ahead, because chili thrip has been a big problem on roses in Perth probably the last 3 or 4 years now. And there are stuff you can do at this time of the year that will protect your roses from chili thrip, help you win the battle against them once the chili thrip season hits later in the year. So you do your hard winter prune, remove all that foliage. If you have had chili thrip, I wouldn't be putting them through the compost heap or through the chip and putting back in the garden. I'd be getting rid of them altogether into your FOGO bin or your green waste bin, and clean up all the foliage that's on the ground underneath them. Try and get rid of any potential sites that the chili thrip can overwinter. Bag those leaves up and into the rubbish bin. Make sure you spray your roses really thoroughly with a strong dilution rate of lime sulfur. Make sure you get into all the nooks and crannies. That will not only help you with the chili thrip, but will help with scale insects as well. And you can apply a systemic insecticide in a granular form. I would put that around the rose early in spring. As soon as you start to see some new growth, put the granular systemic around the root system, and then mulch your roses, and that will certainly help. And then whatever controls you normally use throughout the growing season, they would start to kick in towards the back end of spring. Good luck with that, because the chili thrip has been terrible on the roses, and it's really sad driving around and seeing what were once beautiful rose gardens just devastated by this little pest that we've seemed to have picked up in the last couple of years. Bree Lucas has a compost bin that's gone rancid and wants to know what she can do. Well, this time of year, you do see a few rancid compost bins, and they're not pleasant. It's because it's cold, it's wet, so you need to get some carbon, some dry material into that compost bin. Try and turn it over as much as you can. If it's a bin rather than a tumbler, then you might be needing to use a garden fork or one of the compost bin screws that you can twist in and open the products that are in there, open that material up. Get some of the moisture out of it and get some dry material, some carbon in there. So that might be some dry deciduous tree leaves, some shredded paper, some ripped up cardboard, something that will add carbon into that compost blend, dry it out a little bit, and hopefully get it back into an aerobic condition rather than the anaerobic condition that makes it smell so delightful. Peter Rowley wants to recommend a hardy native ground cover that's suitable for Perth. There's plenty of hardy ground covers you can try in Perth in the native varieties, Peter. One of my favourites is a hemiandra. It's a very prostrate ground cover, barely gets above ground level, has nice dark green, slightly spiky foliage, and it either comes in a white flowered form or a mauvey blue flowered form. Incredibly tough plant. We can't go wrong with the hemiandras. Myoporum's another native ground cover. Gets a little bit higher than the hemiandra, might make it up as tall as 10 centimetres or so. There's a couple of different forms. You can get the green leaf form, purple leaf form, white flowers or pink flowers. One plant will cover 4 or 5 metres very easily, and super tough plant. And lastly, grevilleas. There are dozens of very good quality ground cover grevilleas that do fantastically in Perth gardens. Two varieties I would look at first would be Gin Gem, which is a beautiful little fine leafed ground cover with red flowers. Another spectacular ground cover grevillea, the Royal Mantle. Bigger felt leaves in the Gin Gem, bit of burgundy colour in the new growth, and toothbrush form red flowers all right through the warmer months. And both those ground covers will easily cover 2 or 3 square metres on their own. And again, super hardy, should be absolutely ideal if you're planting something like a verge garden or just a replacement for lawn areas where you're no longer wanting to grow lawn in hot sunny areas. So any of those, the hemiandra, myoporum, or any of the ground cover grevilleas will do fantastically well for you. Carol wants to know, can I put food scraps directly into the gardens, or do I need a compost bin? Is there anything I can't put in there? Is it okay if the food's cooked? Well, Carol, you can put veggie scraps directly into the garden. Dig a deep hole. They will decay down reasonably quickly and provide nutrients and a bit of moisture back into the soil. If you do that regularly in 1 or 2 spots, you'll also build up good colonies of earthworms. There's really technically nothing you can't put in there as far as food scraps go. There's some things I'd probably avoid, like meat scraps, for example. Does have a habit of, one, if you've got dogs, they're going to be digging them up and making a mess in your garden. But worse than that, it can encourage vermin, particularly rats, into the garden, and they see that as just a bit of a smorgasbord. So I'd probably avoid putting meat scraps in there. If the food's cooked, that's fine; they'll break down even quicker. So dig a nice big hole, backfill them, and if you dot them around the garden, you'll just end up having areas that break down pretty quickly, and just adding nutrients. It's almost like skipping the compost bin and you're composting in the garden. So it's a technique many gardeners have employed for many years. So you will have no problems doing that at all. Shannon is wanting to plant potatoes, but lives on an apartment, only has a small balcony, and wants to know if that's doable. Absolutely, Shannon. If you have a look around, you'll find specialised containers that are marketed purely for growing potatoes in pots. So you won't be able to grow massive amounts in there, but you certainly have more than just an interest worth out of them. But you can just buy yourself a decent sized plastic pot. I'd go minimum size, sort of 30 litres, 50 litres would be better. Get some just good quality potting mix, fill about 2/3 fill the pot, put a couple of seed potatoes in there, cover the potatoes, and then as soon as you see them pop up, some potato fertilizer in there. Keep them well watered during those warm months. Make sure that pot's draining freely. You don't want the potting mix to get too wet. You'll be able to get yourself a decent crop. You'll be surprised how good you can turn 2 or 3 seed potatoes into 15 or 20 new seasons of potatoes by the start of summer. So definitely can do it, and I would strongly encourage you to have a go if you're interested in doing it. Chris is thinking about grabbing some asparagus from Garden Express. It's a very good thing to think about, but are they difficult to grow, and wants to know whether they're best in pots or ground. Asparagus, definitely best in the ground. Much easier to grow them in the ground. They're a long-term plant. Now, they're not difficult to grow, but you plant them and you're harvesting them for 20 odd years. So they're worth putting some effort in. You prepare the soil really well at planting time. As I mentioned earlier, don't harvest that. Don't let the spears form in the first couple of years. So as soon as you see a spear popping up, just cut that off, let it grow the asparagus fern, because that asparagus fern will grow up, photosynthesize, and put nutrients back into the crown to produce spears in not next year, the year after. So you're about 3-year-old, third year in the ground, you'll start getting good crops of spears. The asparagus fern, the spears will come up in spring. The foliage grows through summer, so keep them well fed and well watered through summer. In winter, the foliage will go yellow. It takes all the nutrients out of the foliage. It gets moved down into the crown. As soon as it's completely yellowed and died off, cut the ferns down, mulch your asparagus crowns with manure and compost, and then the process will start again in spring. They're quite easy to grow, and they're very, very rewarding, but definitely in the ground. You would be able to grow them in pots, but I don't think you'd be able to get as good a crops in pots as in the ground. Angelo Tancredi, his mother has an orange tree that's covered in fruit, but this year covered with flowers, but this year not one orange, not even a flower. So she had no fruit, no flower, where it's been a reliable fruiter in the past. Angelo hasn't said where they're living, so it makes it a little bit harder to get. So if you don't get fruit and flowers on an orange tree that's been previously a really good producer, that says to me it's a one-off, maybe climatic conditions, maybe excessively dry, excessively wet even. Both of those can cause the plant to go into shock and get their flowering out of sync, and just its whole growth and production is just out of its normal pattern. So just have a look at those issues. So if you're in an area that's had a lot of water, so we know some of our eastern states garden friends have had way too much rain in their gardens over the last 12 months. Just see if there's been an issue with drainage. You might need to open that soil up, get some compost into the ground to improve drainage, maybe even put a drainage system in to try and get some of the excess water away. If it's been particularly dry where you are, again, it might be some soil improvement with some wetting agent, try and get some moisture down into that profile. Fertilizing the tree is really important. So if you've had a tree that's been in some stress, normally the soil's been stressed. So a fertilizer like Troforte that will help rebuild some microbial life in the soil will really be of great value. So and mulching and adding compost and just making sure it's getting all the things it needs. And hopefully that it's been a one-off bad season. Next year you'll get some good flowers and fruits again. It's very frustrating growing a tree for 12 months and not getting any fruit off it. Harriet planted a wattle tree a few years ago, and she didn't realise it would get so big and it started to lift the pavers. Wants to know if there's any remedy for that. Well, there probably is a remedy for it, Harriet, but it's not a great one. If it's lifting pavers, it's probably because the wattle tree is too big for that area and it's too close to the pavers, and the root system will continue to get through and lift that pavers. Most the wattles we grow in the gardens are short-lived as well, so they grow fast, die young type plant. So if it's lifting the pavers, you may need to get in there, cut some of those roots back, try and get your pavers reset again, but chances are it'll just keep happening. But you might be looking at a 10-year-old tree is probably the end of the lifespan for some species of wattles, maybe 15 for other, and you just have to decide whether you want to put up with that for that lifespan of the wattle, or whether you want to take it out now and replace it with something more suitable for that spot that's not going to potentially disturb the pavers as much as the wattle. It's an unfortunate thing that happens a lot with trees. They get planted too close to infrastructure and they can cause some problems. So always best to make sure you know exactly how big trees are going to get, because they might look nice and small and cute when you first plant them, but particularly something like a wattle does grow very quickly. Good luck with that, Harriet. So it's either deal with it till it comes to the end of its lifespan, or you're going to have to take it out now and replace it. The Kalamunda Garden Festival's message us through. Always good to hear from the guys at Kalamunda Garden Festival. They say they know I love my fruit trees, and apart from Kensington Pride, is there another variety of mango you're really fond of and you like to grow in Perth? There absolutely is, Mr. and Mrs. Kalamunda Garden Festival. The R2E2 is a sensational mango. Biggest fruit pretty much of all the mangoes, up to a couple of kilos. Beautiful flavour, very easy to grow. Grows as well as the Kensington Pride does for us here in Perth, and very good producer all around Australia. But there is a massive range of mangoes, different varieties that many of the mango growers swear by. Ones like Kent and Keat and Flora Glen. There's so many different varieties that you can grow. But I'm a big fan of the Kensington Pride and R2E2. I think they're just about as good as they get, and very, very reliable, which is very, very important when you're planting fruit trees. Now, I've only got 10 minutes to go, so we're winding down to the last few questions. So if you have any more questions or photos you want to send in, better get to it pretty quick, because there's only 10 minutes to go. Adrian Lowe is having an issue. He's found some soil in their garage. It's years old and it's gone hydrophobic, and wants to know whether it can be revived. Well, it can, Adrian. It's probably dried out. All that microbial life within the organic material, that potting mix or soil mix, will have definitely gone by now. So what I would do, if it's not large volumes of it, I'd put it through the compost system. You mix it in with your composting greens, and it'll add a carbon to that compost blend straight away, and it'll basically make use of the organic material already contained within those soil mix or potting mix, and break that down and add it into the compost. If you've got quite a lot of it, just dig it into the garden. Find areas of open soil where you can dig it in, maybe put a bit of animal manure, maybe a bit of densified poultry manure, blend that through, dig it through really thoroughly, and again, it will break down into that into the soil profile and feed your soil. So you can definitely use it. Don't throw it away. It's wasteful to throw it away, but either mix it into the garden soil or put it through your composting. Lucy Goodall wants to know whether they can grow. She can grow basil inside. Wants to know how big they'll get. Well, Lucy definitely can grow basil and other herbs inside. What you need is a windowsill that gets plenty of natural light, particularly through winter. The more natural light you can get through in that windowsill, the better. You'll quite often see a lot of people grow their herbs that they're using a lot of just on the windowsill in the kitchen, because it's obviously right there ready to use. Most of the herbs, they don't get too big. They get restricted by the size of the pot. So, your basil plant will probably only get 30 centimetres by 30 centimetres maximum. And you're at that pruning and taking foliage and growth of it all the time, keeping it in check that way. Probably the best herbs to grow indoors in that sort of situation would be all the grow fast and quick to harvest ones. So basil's ideal. Coriander in winter is really good. You can grow, and even things like basil and chives, you can grow them indoors on a windowsill as long as they're getting plenty of light. In summer, when obviously the weather warms up, you need to be a little bit more careful about where you have them so they're not getting scorched or dried out by the hot summer sun. Tyron Zimmerman has a number of roses in their front yards that pruned every July. This year they've come back with quite small blooms and nowhere near as aromatic, which is no good, because one of the main reasons you grow roses for their perfume. Had a lot of aphids and those sort of problems. But if you've got very small roses, there's probably a couple of things that could be going on there. One is you've gone back to rootstock, similar as we spoke about with the citrus, how the rootstock can take over and you end up, instead of with a beautiful orange tree, you end up with something producing sour lemon-like fruit. With the roses, the rootstocks are incredibly vigorous. And it's one of the main reasons why they're used as rootstock because they add that vigor to the plant and vigor to the root system. The flowers that most of them produce are very small, and they pretty much are all spring flowers. So something like Fortuniana, which is very popular in Perth, produces small white flowers in early spring, and that's pretty much it. And they're not renowned for their perfume. Floribunda is another, produces flowers only in spring, very popular as a rootstock in other parts of Australia, but very little perfume. So you'll need to have a look and see whether the rootstock's taken over from the plant. The only other issue that could possibly cause the small blooms is herbicide drift. So if somebody's been spraying herbicides near your roses, roses are very sensitive to a lot of herbicides, glyphosate in particular, and it doesn't take much. So they could be spraying 1 metre, 2 metres away from the plant. The drift moves onto the rose, deforms the foliage, and will deform the flowers as well. And so you basically got to find out whether that's happened around your roses. If not, I'd be suspecting quite strongly that its rootstock has taken over. So the competition draw, we've got the $50 Garden Express voucher. There's been lots of great questions today, some fantastic photos as well. So it wasn't an easy choice, but we have gone with Suzanne Spencer, who asked about those pesky caterpillars devouring her peace lilies. Suzanne, please don't be too keen to kill all those caterpillars off. I know it's frustrating when they're chowing down on your peace lilies, but they do grow into beautiful hawk moths, and they're an absolute asset to the garden. So you can use that voucher, Suzanne. Jump on the Garden Express website, have a look at all those end of financial year specials, and use the discount code and get yourself a great bargain there. So congratulations. So to claim your prize, just message us on Facebook, and Holly will sort that out for you. We'll be taking a break next week, but still continue to send us all your questions and photos, and we'll answer them when we come back. So make sure you hit the like button, share with all your friends, and tag them in so they know what's going on, and we get some more followers. It's always good. More followers, the better. The bigger the community, the more information we can share. Tune in next week and send us some messages and photos, and we will talk to you then.
Sorry. Say bye.
Bye-bye.